Hello ladies and gentlemen, GamingMedley here, and today is time for a bit of a longer form thought piece on Derek Smart and his rather infamous relationship with CIG, most importantly Chris Roberts. So I've been meaning to make this video for like a week, and now is when it's getting released, and the reason for that is I've just been sick for the past week and I've had a sore throat and a cough, and it's hard to do speaking things when you can't talk. So yeah. Now I do need to preface this video with a few things. If you are hoping for a video telling you why Derek Smart is the man and we should worship him for exposing the supposed farce that is, at least according to him, Star Citizen, this video is not that. Conversely, if you're hoping for a video telling you why Derek Smart is the gaming industry's Satan who should be skewered on a pike for defamation of Star Citizen, this video is not that either. What this video is an attempt at making a well thought out, unbiased evaluation of whether Derek Smart is justified in his continued attacks on Star Citizen, as well as whether CIG should have refunded Derek Smart's founder account. The short answer is both CIG and Derek Smart have done questionable things. However, it's pretty obvious that Derek Smart has done many more things that are actually malicious in nature than CIG has done. In order to figure out how I reached this conclusion, let's look at the two main players here, Derek Smart, semi-retired gamer dude in his own words, and Chris Roberts, who is the current head of CIG as well as the current lead developer and visionary behind Star Citizen. Both of these men are known in the space sim genre specifically and in the gaming community at large. Roberts more than Smart, mainly because Smart's games have historically played second fiddle to, well, anything else out on the market. In order to give you an idea of this year Smart has released a sci-fi MMO called Line of Defense along the lines of PlanetSide 2, it's currently in early access, as well as releasing a remastered version of his most well-received game, Universal Combat Evolved, which still sits at a currently mostly negative rating of 39% on Steam, and that's also in early access. If you haven't heard of either of these games, it's probably because everybody who would play the remastered Universal Combat Evolved is playing Elite Dangerous, and anyone who is interested in Line of Defense is probably playing PlanetSide 2. By and large, even though he claims to have a net worth of 100 million, Smart's games have been received pretty horrendously, and most of that negative feedback inevitably boils down to the same opinion: games with amazing concepts that fail miserably to execute them. You've been watching Line of Defense and Universal Combat Evolved in the background, so the problems with those games should be glaringly obvious. Universal Combat Evolved requires insane micromanagement, and it's highly suggested that you read the game's 93-page tutorial before playing it, which is way too much to ask me or probably anybody else to do because most people have lives. Line of Defense is just not coming together well. But once you get into these games, you can do whatever you want, I guess? However, it's not as if Chris Roberts has a stellar track record of managing things either. True, he is responsible for Wing Commander, one of the most highly regarded space simulations of all time. However, he's also responsible for a long list of movies, and to say that any of them have been highly acclaimed is exaggerating to say the least. However, since movies are quite a bit different from games, I think using them against Chris Roberts as a vessel to say Star Citizen will not succeed is a bit of a low blow. The concern then becomes how he has done essentially nothing in the video gaming industry between Wing Commander and Star Citizen. His most recent games were Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince game in 2009, which has a surprisingly high average of 7.7 on IGN considering it's a licensed movie game, and Freelancer, a space combat and trading sim in 2003, which holds a rating of 8.3 out of 10 from GameSpot. Disregarding the Half-Blood Prince because I highly doubt much inspiration is being taken from that into Star Citizen, his last independent space-related game was made 12 years ago. Does he have the knowledge that it would take to make Star Citizen in the current gaming environment, and more importantly, does he know enough to deliver on the technical aspects of the game? I have my reservations, but his track record is certainly better than Smart's, if we're just looking at video games. So, based purely on their gaming development track records, Smart has very little reason to talk as much shit about Chris Roberts as he has been, but he has exposed some interesting things about CIG, such as the fact that Sandy Gardner, aka the head of CIG's marketing and HR, is Chris Roberts' wife. To me, that's still a conflict of interest for Chris Roberts and CIG, and I don't personally approve regardless of whether or not the escapist's allegations of her being toxic to work with are true. Oh, and if you were hoping for some commentary on the whole escapist thing, you can find it in the annotation in the top left of the screen. I'm not going to go into that here since I've already made a video on it and it's not extremely relevant to what I want to say, and I want to stay as much on topic as possible. However, Smart has also threatened to do grandiosely idiotic things like, say, spend $1 million to launch a personal investigation into whether or not CIG is enacting illegitimate business practices, which is slightly stupid to say the least. His reason for doing this was initially that CIG had refunded him for his Star Citizen backer account without his approval, although it seems to have turned into a vendetta far more personal than it was initially since he announced this. In order to get a bit more in depth about this and let those of you who don't know what's going on, Derek Smart actually purchased a Founders Pack for Star Citizen that cost $250 at one point in time, and he initially appeared immensely optimistic about the project. However, as that approving veneer faded, he began making posts on the Star Citizen forums that CIG claimed amounted to defamation, so they refunded him his Founders Pack. Although it is a bit frightening to me that it seems as if CIG can simply refund people's Founders Packs for simply responding to the game negatively, they haven't done this to anyone else, and Smart was being extremely toxic about the game. In fact, he probably would have been banned from any other game should he have talked about it similarly. Although I wish that CIG had sent him a warning, I can't exactly say that what they did in essentially banning him was unjustified, so it's kind of a gray area to me. Smart has, since he was banned, made attacking CIG and its company heads in various ways essentially his job. That's not an exaggeration either. Despite the fact that he has 2 games in early access, he seems to be more focused on updating his blogs about why CIG is horrid and Star Citizen will fail than he seems to be concerned with the fact that his MMO has a 39% user rating and functions horrendously, or the fact that no one knows or cares about Universal Combat Evolved's remastering. Personally, I don't care about his squabble with CIG. Or I wouldn't if it didn't come off as egocentric grandstanding. Fights amongst celebrities, internet gaming or otherwise are a dime a dozen, but to be as vicious as Smart has been crosses a professional line that should not have been crossed in my humble opinion. Smart could have been constructively critical of the game, and to me that would have been absolutely fine. He could have said he was worried about the game and how it was pushed back from its initial release date at the end of 2014 to the end of 2016, and he would have been echoing the concerns any rational person would have about a game of the scope and hype of Star Citizen. But instead, he chose to attack Chris Roberts and Sandy Gardner personally, and in a matter that made up multiple times over the offense of having his Founders Pack refunded. And to me, that's what makes his attacks seem more like grandstanding, designed to do nothing more than garner media attention than anything else. They don't seem to serve any real purpose. They aren't things that would be helpful to the game or its design. The only use they serve is to provide an insane amount of vitriol that gets the attention of media outlets, which then report on whatever he has to say about CIG and Star Citizen. Personally, I would assume that everything he's doing is a publicity stunt to try and garner attention for his games that are currently flying far, far under any radar that exists. But GM, you say, didn't you say this would be unbiased? After all, you are the GM. Sure thing, kiddos. Let's assume that Derek Smart is concerned about Star Citizen. Legitimately. Let's assume that he wants it to succeed, but is afraid that CIG is pulling illegal shit behind closed doors. You know what? He has every right to be concerned about Star Citizen. I am. Massively. A commenter by the name of Tyler Franks asked me if I thought that the game would deliver everything it claims it's going to on launch. I said no because I don't think it will. I want it to, but considering just how utterly impossible the technical aspects the game is trying to achieve seem, I currently just don't think it can happen. Before you get angry at me, I want CIG to prove me wrong. I want Star Citizen to be everything they promised and more. I want to love the game to death, but if I'm looking at the game from the perspective of a rational, cynical consumer, which is what I am at heart and what I need to bring to the table, I just can't trust that the game is going to provide everything CIG claims it will. Try and keep in mind that even Chris Roberts has said that this game amounts to 3 or 4 average AAA games, including open world ones like The Witcher 3. They're trying to make a procedurally generated No Man's Sky universe that incorporates a highly customizable shipbuilding experience that's also a first-person shooter, that's also an MMO if you want to play it that way, in addition to God knows what else. Derek Smart has said that in his estimation they would need at least $150 million to make this game, and it's currently had $93 million provided through crowdfunding. And that's probably the least crazy thing Derek Smart has said about Star Citizen. In fact, it's not crazy at all. This game is promising the world and back, and to me it seems the chances they'll be able to provide what they promised are slim. What I assume will happen is the game will seem to be everything you've wanted, but as you play it more and more, it will be uncovered that the game is still a huge work in progress. That's what I'm afraid will happen, and Derek Smart could have said as much if he wanted to raise legitimate concerns about the game. But as hard as I try to be unbiased, I'm having difficulty maintaining any sliver of belief that Smart's blog posts were simply intended to be constructive feedback and had no ill intent. In all honesty, if I'm going to give my opinion of this situation to you all straight, It seems like a man who has amazing ideas is angry that his games constantly seem to be overlooked, and he's channeling that frustration into a game that he probably sees as something he could have achieved but hasn't for reasons that are unfathomable to him. As I've mentioned, he's done things that most people would either consider crazy or at least incredibly unprofessional, such as taking screenshots of the supposed legal charges he intends to level against CIG, which anybody who knows anything about law knows is a real good way to get your case thrown out of court, to claiming a petition that stated he misrepresented Star Citizen fans was a defamation attempt. Did he organize the anonymous sources that came forward to the escapist? I don't know, and is not something that I'm willing to accuse him of, but it seems like something that he is at least capable of based on his past actions. But is Derek Smart right to raise questions about Gardner and Roberts' relationship, as well as pointing out that this is a monumental project for someone to undertake after 12 years out of the genre? Absolutely. He should have definitely found a less toxic way to express those concerns, but they're absolutely valid concerns to have. Ultimately, guys, if I look at this situation as objectively as I can, this much is clear to me. Derek Smart was and is unnecessarily extremely toxic towards members of CIG and should find a better way to communicate his concerns about Star Citizen if he wants his opinions of the game to be given any more credence than an insane man's ramblings. However, even though he says it extremely badly and in a way that I cannot condone even for 1 second, some of the concerns that he has brought up about the game are valid concerns to have. The problem is that those concerns are concerns that most rational people would have regardless of whether or not he talked about them in a blog. So personally, I'm loath to give him any credit for pointing these concerns out as if he has been the only one to do so. Derek Smart's attacks on CIG ultimately seem like the bumbling efforts of a man who wishes he could have CIG's success to draw attention to himself and his own projects, and the response has been decidedly negative. Although within these toxic attacks he does raise cogent concerns, he obscures them with so much visceral hatred that they ultimately seem impotent. I doubt that he realizes his points would come across much more strongly if he phrased them more thoughtfully, and that if he did so, he might actually have a shot at drawing attention to himself in a non-negative way. However, as a responsible consumer, it is important to keep in mind that some of the concerns he has brought up are valid, and just because he's extremely toxic and unprofessional does not make them any less so. Even a stopped clock is right twice a day. In conclusion, everyone, think with your heads and not with your hearts. Although Smart has undoubtedly done far more wrong than he has done right, and has generally acted like an egocentric, grandstanding prick whose games you'll never play if you're even half sane, don't discount some of the concerns about Star Citizen, such as the game's funding, Gardner and Roberts' relationship being a potential conflict of interest, and whether or not the game can achieve what it has promised simply because he happened to speak about those things. Those are still valid concerns for any rational consumer to have. Okay, so now's the time to dislike this video for not being enough of a Star Citizen fanboy's perspective or tearing apart Smart enough. If you don't want to do that, however, or if you enjoyed this look into this situation because I thought it was a pretty unique take on it, feel free to like or sub. Well, actually, sub either way. GM, out.